The strange marriage area lived on a small human colony at the edge of the stars. Life there was quiet, filled with farming, trade, and the slow turning of days. But when she announced that she would marry Kale, the silent stranger, the whole colony began to whisper Kale had arrived 2 years earlier, walking out of the desert with nothing but a cloak and a heavy satchel. He never spoke, not even to greet the people who offered him water and food. His eyes were sharp, dark like endless night, and though his lips never moved, he seemed to listen. To everything, he built himself a small house at the edge of the fields where the wind sang and the shadows grew long. Every evening, he worked the soil with hands that looked too scarred for farming. Arya was not like the other women in the colony. She was curious, brave, and always asking questions. When others looked at Kale with fear or distrust, she looked at him with wonder. Why did he stay alone? Never speaking, never laughing, never even singing the old earth songs. What secret did his silence hide? The day she announced the marriage, people gathered at the market and shook their heads. She marries a shadow, one old man muttered. He carries the scars of soldiers, said another, but he hides his tongue like a snake. The children laughed, calling him the mute, Thysost. But Arya ignored them all. Her heart told her that Kyle was not dangerous but different, and sometimes different was not to be feared, but respected. The wedding itself was small, under the silver sky of 2 moons. Kale stood tall, his cloak wrapped around him, his face unreadable. He did not speak the vows, only nodded when the priest asked. The people looked at one another, uneasy with the silence. Yet Arya smiled, taking his hand, as if words were not needed between them. Afterward, the couple walked back to their home. The colony was alive with whispers. Why would she tie her life to a man who cannot speak? They asked. But Arya felt no fear. She felt only curiosity, and perhaps a strange comfort in the calm way Kyle moved, as if nothing in the world could disturb him. That night, when the lamps burned low, Arya sat across from him. The wind howled outside, and the stars stretched like rivers of fire across the sky. She asked him softly, "Will you ever speak to me?" Kale did not answer. Instead, he looked up at the heavens, his eyes reflecting the faraway light. For a moment, it was as if he was searching the stars for something or someone. His silence was heavy, not empty. It carried weight, as though he bore memories too large for words. Arya's eyes drifted to the satchel he always kept near him. He never let anyone touch it, never left it behind. When she asked what was inside, he only gave a faint shake of his head. But sometimes at night, she heard a strange hum, like a living voice, coming from within. It made her shiver, yet it also made her heart race with questions. Days passed into weeks, and their life settled into rhythm. Kale worked in the fields. Quiet but steady, he built her a garden, fixed the broken roof, and carried water with strength that seemed impossible for a single man. But the scars on his arms spoke of battles, and the way he moved sometimes, swift, sharp, precise, was not the way of farmers. Arya noticed the way he scanned the horizon as if expecting danger, the way his hand twitched when thunder rolled, as though it reminded him of something else, something darker. One night, she woke and found him sitting outside, the satchel open. Before him, in his hands, was a blade. It glowed faintly with a strange light, blue and silver like moonfire. The weapon hummed softly, as if alive. Kyle sat sharpening it, his face calm, his movements careful. Arya froze, watching from the doorway. The sight filled her with both fear and wonder. Why would a silent farmer need such a weapon? Why did it shine with a power that felt older than the colony itself? Kale lifted his head, slightly, his dark eyes meeting hers across the shadows. For a long moment, neither moved. Then he slowly sheathed the blade, closed the satchel, and stood. Without a word, he returned to the house. Arya followed, her heart pounding. She did not speak, but inside her mind the question screamed. The colony thought she had married a quiet, harmless man. But that night, Arya understood. Kyle's silence was not weakness. It was a wall, hiding something vast, dangerous, and powerful. And though she had married him with trust in her heart, a new thought crept into her mind. What happens when the wall breaks the silent life? Arya's days with Kale soon turned into a life of strange silence. The colony woke each morning to the sound of traders, farmers, and children laughing, but her house was always quiet, filled only with the rhythm of Kale's footsteps and the whisper of wind through the walls. He was a good husband, in his own silent way. He fixed broken tools, built her a strong fence around the garden, and carried her burdens without a single complaint. When storms came, he stood at the doorway like a wall, shielding her from the wind. Yet still, he never spoke. Not one word, not even her name. The people of the colony found it strange. They said a husband's words bring comfort. They whispered that perhaps he could not speak at all. Others said he was cursed and that Arya had tied herself to a ghost. But Arya did not listen. Her heart told her his silence was not emptiness, but something heavier, something chosen. At night, when the moons hung low, Kale would sit alone outside, sharpening the strange, glowing blade. The sound of metal sliding against stone filled the air like a heartbeat, steady and slow. Arya would watch from the shadows, her chest tight with questions. Why would a farmer keep a weapon that sang like living fire? And why did he touch it with such care as if it were the last piece of his soul? Sometimes she saw the scars on his back when he removed his cloak. Not small scratches, but deep lines, burned marks and cuts that spoke of countless battles. No farmer gained such scars. These were the marks of soldiers, warriors, or killers. She wanted to ask, but his silence crushed every question in her throat. Yet Kyle was not cruel. He was gentle when she stumbled, his strong hands lifting her with care. When she fell ill, he stayed at her side, feeding her soup and watching over her as she slept. In the quiet moments, she could almost forget the fear. But then she would see the blade, glowing faintly in the corner of the room, and her heart would race again. One evening, as they walked through the fields, the ground shook with a deep rumble. The earth trembled and birds scattered into the darkening sky. The colonists rushed out, pointing toward the horizon. In the distance, burning streaks cut across the heavens. Ships entering atmosphere, alien. Ships, sharp and cruel, like metal beasts tearing through the sky. Fear spread through the colony like wildfire. Children cried, parents clutched them tight, and elders whispered old stories of invaders. Humans were new in this corner of space, fragile settlers far from the safety of fleets. No one expected protection, no one expected mercy. The people began to pack, ready to flee into the mountains, but Kale did not move. He stood in silence, watching the burning trails in the sky. His face did not change. His eyes did not blink. It was as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. Arya felt her skin prickle. For the first time, she realized that his silence was not only about the past, it was about the future. That night, as the colony gathered in fear, Kale returned to their home. Arya followed him. Trembling with questions, she found him standing over the open satchel, the glowing blade in his hands. The weapon pulsed with light, brighter than ever. The hum filled the room, deep and steady. Like the growl of some ancient beast, Arya whispered, "Kyle, why do you have this?" Her voice shook, but still he gave no answer. He simply slid the blade across his palm, and the weapon flared with blue fire. The scars on his body seemed to shine under the glow. For the first time, she saw not a farmer, not a husband, but something far greater, something terrifying. Outside, the sky burned with the approach of the alien ships. The colony leaders shouted for calm, but their voices were weak. Everyone knew humans had no real weapons, no fleets, no armies. They were settlers, prey for empires. But Kyle stood in silence, blade shining in his hand. And for the first time, Arya felt the weight of what she had married. She had not married a man of silence. She had married a storm that had chosen to sleep. But now, the storm was waking. Whispers of war. The colony tried to return to normal after the burning ships crossed the sky, but whispers followed every corner. In the market, people spoke in hushed voices. At the water pumps, children asked questions their parents could not answer. Everywhere, the same fear lingered. Aliens were coming and no one could stop them. Arya heard the whispers too. Merchants claimed they had seen entire colonies swallowed by alien empires. Farmers spoke of ships that harvested planets, like fields of grain. Old soldiers from Earth muttered about wars humans had already lost. Each story was darker than the last, and with each story eyes turned toward the silent man living at the edge of the fields. Kale walked among them without a word. When fear rose, he was calm. When others trembled, his steps were steady. It was as if he had already seen the worst the universe could give, and nothing surprised him anymore. The people began to wonder, who was this man? Really? Why did he carry scars of war, yet never speak of it? One night, the colony council gathered. In the hall, the air was thick with smoke from the lanterns. Leaders argued, should they flee into the mountains or beg the aliens for mercy? Some said humans were too weak to resist. Others said surrender was the only way to survive. But while they argued, Kale stood at the back, silent as always. When the meeting ended in chaos, Arya found him outside looking at the stars again. Kale, she whispered, her voice trembling. Tell me what you know, please. But he gave no reply, only the same heavy silence. And yet in his eyes she saw something that chilled her blood. It was not fear, but recognition. He had seen these enemies before. Days later, the sky tore open again. Alien ships descended, larger this time, like steel predators circling above. Their shadows covered the fields, turning daylight into dusk. The colonists screamed, hiding in their homes, but there was no place to hide from ships that could burn the land with a single strike. The first to land was a scouting party. Their ship cut into the earth with claws of fire. The aliens stepped out, tall and armored, their voices sharp like broken glass. They looked at the humans with cold amusement. Fragile creatures, they called them, soft and weak. One alien struck the colony leader to the ground. Laughing as the humans scattered in fear, Arya clutched Kale's arm, her heart pounding. She expected him to run, to hide, like the others. But Kale did not move. His eyes followed the aliens with the same steady calm. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The aliens mocked, demanding surrender, threatening to burn the fields. Then they saw Kale. One of them sneered and stepped toward him. Silent One, the alien hissed, kneel before your masters. The colony watched in terror, but Kale's hand slowly reached for the satchel. At his side, the blade slid free with a soft hum. Blue fire lit the night, reflecting in the wide eyes of every human and alien. For the first time, Arya saw the strangers hesitate. The lead alien growled, but his voice cracked with unease. That weapon, it cannot be. Kale stepped forward, silent as ever. His movements were smooth, sharp, controlled. Then the blade cut through the air, and in one strike, the alien fell. The colony gasped, the ground stained with fire and fear. The others stepped back, their armor trembling under the glow of the weapon. Whispers spread instantly, not human whispers, but alien ones. Not a farmer, they muttered. Not a settler. He is one of them. Fear passed through the invaders like a plague. They retreated to their ship, dragging their fallen with them. The engines roared, and the ship tore back into the sky. The colony was silent, staring at Kale. For the first time, they feared him more than the enemy. Arya's hands shook as she looked at her husband. The quiet farmer, the silent man, had become something else. The blade still glowed in his hand, alive with terrible power. Kale sheathed it slowly, his face as calm as ever. But the silence around him was no longer the silence of mystery. It was the silence of war, the first strike. The colony did not sleep that night. The glow of Kale's blade haunted their minds. Children hid under blankets, whispering of monsters. Elders prayed to long-forgotten gods. Even the boldest men sat in silence, unsure if they feared the aliens more, or the man they had lived. Beside, for 2 years, Arya lay awake, her heart restless. She had seen Kale strike. She had seen the alien fall with a single sweep of light. It was no ordinary weapon, it was no ordinary man. And though he still said nothing, his silence now roared louder than any voice. At dawn, the sky trembled again. The aliens returned, their ships blotting out the sun. This time they came in force. Dozens of soldiers poured into the fields, their armor black and sharp, their weapons glowing with cruel light. They marched with laughter, confident in their strength. They did not see Kale as a man, but as prey who had stolen a single victory. Now they came to make him an example. The colony gathered in fear, pushed into the square like cattle. Alien soldiers circled them, their weapons pointed at men, women, and children. The colony leader, bruised from the earlier strike, tried once more to beg for peace. "We surrender," he cried, his voice shaking. But the alien commander only laughed, his voice echoing like metal breaking. "There is no surrender for animals," he hissed. He raised his blade to strike the leader down, and then the silent man moved. Kale stepped from the crowd, cloak falling away, scars glinting in the sunlight. His hand gripped the glowing weapon. The hum filled the air, deep and terrible. The aliens froze, their laughter cut short. The commander snarled, "You dare again!" But there was a crack in his voice. The soldiers shifted uneasily, their confidence faltering. Kyle said nothing. He simply raised the blade, its light burning brighter. The first alien charged fast as lightning. The crowd gasped, too fast for human eyes to follow. But Kyle moved faster. The glowing blade cut through armor as if it were paper. The alien fell in two, silence following his death. Panic spread among the soldiers. They opened fire. Beams of energy tearing across the square. The colonists screamed, throwing themselves to the ground. But Kale moved like a storm. His blade caught the beams, bending light itself. Each strike sent sparks into the air. Each step drove terror deeper into the hearts of the invaders. He was not fighting like a farmer. He was fighting like a legend. A man trained in wars the colony could not even imagine. Each swing of the blade was poetry of death. Each movement spoke of countless battles survived. The aliens realized too late. This was not a weak human. This was something else, something they had feared in old wars. The commander roared, ordering all soldiers forward. Dozens rushed him at once. Kale's silence never broke. He spun, cut, leapt, his blade leaving trails of blue fire in the air. Bodies fell, armor cracked, weapons shattered. The ground shook with each clash. By the time the dust cleared, half the squad lay broken at his feet. The survivors backed away, their eyes wide. The commander staggered, fear breaking through his rage. He pointed at the blade, shouting in a tongue older than the stars. "That weapon is forbidden. It was lost. It was destroyed." But Kale did not answer. He stepped closer, the glow of his blade reflecting in the commander's trembling eyes. Arya stood frozen, her breath caught in her throat. She had married a silent man, but here in the square she saw the truth. She had married a weapon, a living blade wrapped in human form, and for the first time she wondered if she had married a savior or a monster. The commander finally broke. He screamed for retreat. The surviving aliens scrambled, dragging their wounded back to the ships. Engines roared, fire split the sky, and then silence fell again. Only the hum of Kyle's blade remained, low and steady, like a heartbeat that belonged to no man. The colonists stared, wide-eyed, unable to speak. The leader, still alive only by Kale's strike, whispered the thought that now lived in every heart. "What are you?" But Kale gave no answer. He sheathed the blade, turned, and walked away. His silence was heavier than words. It was the silence of a legend that had awakened again. The hidden past. The colony lived in silence after the battle, not the silence of peace, but the silence of fear. Children no longer played in the streets. Farmers no longer sang at work. Even the market stalls stood quiet, eyes turning whenever Kale walked by. They had seen him fight. They had seen the glowing blade cut through armored giants like straw. No one dared to speak against him, but no one dared to stand close either. The man who once seemed strange was now untouchable, and the whispers grew darker. Some called him a savior. Others called him a curse that would bring more death. Arya watched him more closely than anyone. She saw the way he cleaned the blade. Each night careful, almost ritualistic. She saw the way his scars caught the light, maps of pain across his skin, and she saw something else. Each time he fought, each time the blade shone, Kale's eyes grew older, heavier, as if carrying a weight too great for one soul. One evening she followed him into the fields. The moons were bright, shadows stretching long. He stood at the edge, staring at the stars again. "Kyle," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You saved us. But who are you?" For the first time he turned to her fully. His eyes burned with storms she could not name. But still, he gave no words. Instead, he opened the satchel wider than ever before. Inside were not just weapons. There were old fragments of armor, broken insignias, and a single piece of cloth burned and torn. On it was a symbol, a circle split by a shining blade. Arya did not know the mark, but somewhere deep in her bones, she felt its weight. It was not just a symbol, it was a warning. The next day, the colony received visitors. Not aliens, not soldiers, but a wandering trader from a far-off system. When he saw Kale in the market, he dropped his goods in terror. "That symbol, on his cloak," the trader cried, pointing with shaking hands. "That is the mark of the Silent Guard." The colonists pressed him for answers. The trader's voice trembled. They were human once, warriors made to fight wars no one else could fight. They carried blades that shone with the light of stars. Whole empires feared them, whole fleets turned away at the sight of their weapons. But they vanished long ago, destroyed or lost in battles that broke galaxies. Whispers spread like fire. The colonists looked at Kale with new fear. Not a farmer, not even a soldier, but a survivor of a legend thought dead. One of the last of the Silent Guard. That night, Arya confronted him again. Her voice trembled but did not break. "Why did you hide this from me? Why do you not speak?" Kale looked at her for a long time, and then, at last, his lips parted. One word, low and rough, broke the silence. "Burden." The word struck her harder than any blade. She understood then. His silence was not weakness. It was choice. It was punishment. The Silent Guard were not only feared by their enemies, they were feared by everyone, because wherever they went, death followed. Arya wept quietly, her heart torn. She had married a man searching for peace, but peace could never find him, because the universe had not forgotten the Silent Guard, and the aliens who fled would return with greater fury. At the edge of the colony, Kyle sharpened his blade again. The glow pulsed like a living star. He knew they would come. He knew his silence would not protect this place. He had tried to live as a man, a husband, a farmer, but the past was not finished with him. Above, the stars shimmered. Ships moved in the darkness, too distant for the naked eye. But Kale could feel them. The storm was coming again, and this time, it would not be a scout party. This time the Empire would bring its full fury. Arya stood behind him, her voice trembling. "Will you fight for us again?" Kale did not answer. He only looked at the blade, and in his silence, she already knew. When the blade shone once more, the universe would remember why it feared the Silent Guard, the return of fear. The days after the battle were quiet, but it was not peace. It was the stillness before a storm. Everyone in the colony felt it. The air was heavy, the skies restless. Even the children played without laughter, as if they too sensed what was coming. The aliens had retreated, but they had not been defeated. Everyone knew it. They would not forget the silent man who struck them down. They would return not with a handful of soldiers, but with the fury of an empire. And when they came, there would be no escape. At the council hall, the leaders argued again. Some demanded they flee into the mountains. Others said they should beg for mercy before the Empire arrived. But their voices were hollow, broken by fear. Each time the debate rose, their eyes slid to Kale, the silent man sitting at the edge of the room. He gave them nothing, no promise, no comfort, not even a word. And that silence frightened them more than the thought of alien fire. Arya watched him closely. Her heart was torn between awe and fear. She knew now who he was. One of the Silent Guard, a name whispered in dread across the stars. The blade he carried was not just a weapon, It was a symbol of terror, of death, of power too great for humans to wield, and yet it was also their only hope. That night, the stars broke open. Arya woke to the sound of thunder without rain. She ran outside, her breath catching in her throat. Above the colony, the sky burned with fire. Dozens of ships hung in orbit, their shapes sharp and cruel, blotting out the moons. The alien empire had returned, and this time they had brought a fleet. Panic swept through the colony. Families grabbed what little they could carry, rushing toward the hills. The elders prayed aloud, voices shaking. The leaders shouted orders, but no one listened. Because everyone knew no wall, no weapon, no plea could stop what hung above them. Except perhaps one. Cale stood in the square, cloak whipping in the wind. The satchel at his side pulsed faintly with light. He gazed at the ships as though they were not predators but old ghosts. Arya ran to him, her hands trembling. "Kyle," she whispered, "please, say something." For the first time in days, he turned his eyes to her. Storms swirled in his gaze. He parted his lips, and a single word fell, heavy as stone. "Stay." Before she could answer, the sky split open again. Massive dropships descended, shaking the ground with their weight. The alien army poured out, thousands of soldiers in black armor, their weapons glowing with killing light. They filled the fields, surrounded the colony, and raised banners that dripped with red. At their center stood a warlord taller than the rest. His armor was etched with scars of countless victories. His voice boomed across the colony, carried by speakers that rattled the air. "Humans," he roared, "your defiance has been noticed. Your world belongs to the Empire. But there is one among you who carries a forbidden blade. Send him to us, or all of you will burn." Silence fell. Every colonist turned, every colonist. Slowly, fearfully, to the man in the square. Cale stood unmoving, his cloak still, his hand resting on the satchel. The warlord laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "So it is true," he sneered. "A relic of the silent guard still breathes. Then let all see his end, and let fear remind the stars who their masters are." The army roared, weapons raised, children screamed, families held each other. Arya felt her knees weaken, her heart thundering in her chest. She looked at Cale, desperate. "Will you fight them?" she begged. But Cale gave no answer. Instead, he opened the satchel. The blade slid free, glowing brighter than ever before. Its light cut through the shadows, painting the square in silver fire. The hum deepened, alive and terrible. The colonists gasped, some falling to their knees. The warlord's laughter faltered, his soldiers shifting uneasily, because they had seen that light before and they remembered what followed. Cale stepped forward, slow and steady. The air itself seemed to tremble around him. He raised the blade, pointing it at the sky, and for the first time his silence was not emptiness, it was promise, it was judgment. The Empire had returned, but so had the fear of the silent guard. The silent legend. The warlord's army filled the valley. Black armor glistened under the burning sky. Weapons hummed, banners swayed, and the ground trembled under the weight of thousands. The colonists stood trapped, their voices swallowed by terror. Above them, the Empire's ships circled like vultures waiting for the kill, and in the center of it all stood Kyle, silent, still, cloak falling back as his blade burned with starfire. The warlord pointed at him, voice booming across the fields. "Relic of a dead order, kneel before the Empire." The soldiers roared, stamping their weapons. But Cale did not move. He raised the blade, and the hum deepened. It was no longer just a weapons song. It was the sound of old wars, of broken empires, of battles written in blood and silence. The colonists fell to their knees, shielding their eyes. Even the aliens shifted, the laughter dying from their throats. Then the warlord charged. The ground shook as the giant moved, his weapon blazing with red fury. The air cracked as energy split the sky. But Kyle stepped forward. Once, and the world seemed to pause. His blade cut through the warlord's strike, shattering it like glass. A second step, a second swing, and the warlord's armor split open. The commander of thousands staggered, falling to his knees. For the first time in centuries, the Empire's army saw their leader bleed. Silence gripped the valley. Then chaos exploded. The soldiers roared and surged forward. Blades, beams, and fire rained down, but Kale moved like a storm unchained. His blade shone brighter, faster, stronger. Each swing tore through armor, each strike carved fear deeper into alien hearts. They came in waves, but none could stand. One strike cut through 10, one step broke their lines. Energy blasts fell around him, but his blade drank the light, bending it, devouring it, sending it back in storms of fire. The ground cracked beneath him. The air screamed with the weight of battle. And through it all, Kale said nothing. His silence was more terrifying than any war cry. The colonists watched in awe and terror. Some prayed, some wept, some simply stared. Arya clutched her chest, her breath torn between pride and dread. This was not her husband, not the quiet farmer who mended fences and carried water. This was the silent guard, a legend wrapped in scars, a weapon the universe itself once feared. The aliens broke. Fear spread faster than flame. They cried out in their own tongue, voices trembling. The silent guard lives. The blade of stars walks again. They fled toward their ships, pushing each other aside. Even the dying warlord crawled backward, his voice cracking with horror. This cannot be. You are all destroyed. Kale stood above him, blade burning like a piece of the sun. For a moment he simply looked down, and then, without a word, he lowered the blade. The warlord's scream echoed as light cut through him. And then there was nothing. The Empire's army broke completely. Ships tore away from the sky, engines screaming, the valley shook with their retreat, and for the first time the colony was left standing, untouched, alive. But no one cheered, no one dared, because every eye was on Kyle. He stood in the center of the battlefield, silent as stone, his blade glowing faintly in the smoke. The colonists whispered his name, but their voices trembled. They knew now he was not theirs. He belonged to something greater, something darker. Arya stepped forward. Her heart heavy, she looked at the man she had married. Her voice shook as she whispered, "Kale, what happens now?" He turned, his eyes carrying the weight of 1,000 battles, and for a moment she thought he might finally speak. But instead, he sheathed the blade, and the silence returned. It was not the silence of peace. It was not the silence of mystery. It was the silence of legend. A silence that would echo across the stars because word would spread, empires would whisper, fleets would remember. The silent guard was not gone. One still walked, one still fought. One still carried the blade that made the universe tremble, and though Kale never spoke again that night, the stars themselves seemed to shiver because when his blade had shone, the universe had remembered fear.